Dr. Lee Warren is a neurosurgeon and a veteran combat surgeon of the Iraq War. He has seen devastating trauma repeatedly over the years, yet nothing could have prepared him for the massive tragedy that hit his home.
Dr. Lee Warren is a father of 5 whose life was shattered by the tragic death of his son Mitch in 2013. Mitch and a friend were both found dead by stabbing. Learning how to live again after massive trauma seems inconceivable, but Dr. Warren says it's absolutely possible. In a new book, Hope is the First Dose, Dr. Warren prescribes hope as a treatment plan and testifies to God's power to heal, even in the deepest heartache.
And please welcome back to the 700 Club, Dr. Lee Warren. Thank you so much for being with us today.
So great to be back, Charlene. Thanks for having me.
First of all, we want to talk about, the atrocities that we're seeing in Israel right now. You served in combat in Iraq. Talk a little bit about the tragedy, the trauma that soldiers and civilians are facing right now.
Yeah, that remains the hardest thing that I've seen with my eyes, is how people deal with these traumatic experiences. We've had generational trauma, really, that happens after these events. So people are facing things that are happening to them now that they'll never get over. And so it's important to remain prayerful and compassionate, because this is not going to be just a short event in their lives.
Switching gears to talk about you personally, you call extreme trauma the massive thing, TMT, and you experienced something in 2013 in your personal life. Talk about the tragedy that hit your family.
Yeah, we lost our son Mitch, who was 19, in a devastating event. He and his best friend were both killed, and the circumstances of that event were never really made clear to us. No one ever really figured out what happened, and so we had a situation where God put something in our lives that there was no answer to and no ability to even find out the answers to. So really the aftermath of that has sort of redefined our family and our faith, and it took us years to find our feet and our hope again.
So police really didn't come to any type of conclusion as to what really happened with your son and his friend who were found dead?
Yeah, they made a sort of a quick judgment of what they thought happened. There were a lot of questions remaining for us. It was considered a murder-suicide. We've never been comfortable with that answer. Mitch and his friend were best friends for years, and neither one were violent, and we can't really believe the official story.
Wow. This is something that is a nightmare for every parent. How did you and your wife, Lisa, cope with the grief of losing your son?
So the first thing that happens is shock. They talk about denial, which is true, and then for a while you question your faith. And fortunately for us, we held on to each other, and the things that we had decided years before that we believed about God turned out to be true. We knew He was with us when we were brokenhearted, and we knew that He was showing up in ways through other people and through Scripture and prayer, and eventually we found our light again, found our hope again.
You talk in your book about grief and how it can sometimes become an idol.
Yes.
What did you learn from that?
Well, I had a dear friend, a chaplain, who came alongside me, and he reminded me of things I'd seen before when people go through hard things like brain cancer and losing things, that some of us sort of allow our world to become defined by the circumstance that we faced. And over time, that can become bigger than God even. If the thing that you've gone through is the biggest thing that you can see, if it becomes the only thing that your life is about, then it becomes an idol. It becomes impossible for even God to speak into that situation. And so we had to learn that God can come alongside you and over time help you sort of transform the way you see those massive events as things that happen in your life, but not the thing that happens in your life.
Now, you are a neurosurgeon.
Yes.
How does trauma affect our brains? Talk about that.
So the first thing that happens is trauma makes your brain feel a lot of things, and you have to remember that feelings aren't facts. Feelings are chemical events that occur in your brain. And sometimes feelings tell the truth, and sometimes they point away from the truth. And so I teach this procedure I call the thought biopsy, where you learn to put a little space between the feeling and the reality of what's actually happening. And so you can learn how to get your thoughts under control, which the Bible told us a long time ago in 2 Corinthians 10:5 about taking your thoughts captive. Yeah. And because we know that feelings and thoughts aren't actually true all the time, then we have to learn to assess them and decide if they're true. And that's what Paul's talking about in Romans 12 when he says to don't let your world conform you to the way it wants you to think, but transform your thinking. And that's how you can take charge again. And that's what we found is the way to get our feet back under us, is to learn to stop listening to those lies that trauma tells you. This will never be okay. I'll never get over this. God must not love me. Those things aren't true, but they sound very loud and very true. They feel very true right after trauma. So take control.
Wow, that's powerful. And as someone who has walked through trauma, you know exactly what you're talking about. Also, you give some really practical ways for people to cope with trauma. What are some of those ways for those who are watching today that they can practically apply to their lives right now?
Well, I think the first thing is to make some decisions. Even now, if you're not going through something hard, make some decisions. Who is God? Put some things in your heart so you can call them back to mind. That's what I kept seeing as I was looking at trauma, is I was looking back through the Bible at people like David and the guy who wrote Lamentations, of what they had been through, and they all make a decision in the middle of their event to change their minds about it, and they call back to mind the things that they learned about God and the things that they believe. So when trauma's lying to you, you can take the high ground and turn that thought back around and decide God's really with me now. He is close to the brokenhearted. He will rise to show me compassion. And you start gaining ground again and stop listening to those lies. And so practically speaking, put some things in your heart that you won't forget even when the pressure's on, and then you can begin to take charge again.
Powerful stuff. Dr. Warren, thank you so much for being with us today. God bless you. And Dr. Warren's book is called Hope is the First Dose, and it's available nationwide.